Hello everyone, welcome back to Vintage Girl. As you can probably tell, I'm not home, but I thought since the lighting in here is really good, that I should film something. Today we're going to be making homemade coffee cake as we talk about the history of coffee and coffee cake. So let's go. Coffee cake evolved from honey cake that was baked in the 17th century and was more similar to bread since it consisted of yeast, flour, sugar, eggs, nuts, spices, and dried fruit. Coffee cake or honey cake can be traced back to places like Germany, Denmark, and Austria. Also, you may be surprised to know that even the modern coffee cake does not consist of any coffee. It is only called coffee cake because it is meant to be eaten with coffee. Speaking of coffee, it is believed to have been discovered by a goatherd in 850 BC when he observed that after his goats ate some berries, they started acting abnormally. Then the man tried them himself and was having the same energetic effects. Before the 1400s in Ethiopia, people began foraging for coffee in the forest undergrowth. The reason coffee is caffeinated is so that herbivores won't eat its leaves. Originally, people made coffee from the leaves of the plant, as well as made a snack that consisted of coffee berries, butter, and salt. They also made an energizing elixir by drying, roasting, and simmering the cherries. Then people began to create trade routes to sell coffee to the Middle East, and it became extremely popular in the 1450s. The first coffee house was in 1475 and is in modern-day Istanbul. The coffee that was served was called Turkish coffee, which is not only a drink but also a technique. In the late 1500s, people in Yemen began farming coffee and exporting it from the port of El Maha, which became known in other parts of the world as Mocha. Coffee was eventually transported or smuggled into India. The Ottoman Empire introduced coffee to Europe, which led them to open coffee houses in the 1500s. Coffee houses eventually came to London, England in the 1650s. Then, in 1663, there were more than 80, despite King Charles II's attempt to ban them in 1675. Coffee houses continued to operate as a place where businessmen met. One of these coffee houses, specifically in London, England, was ran by Edward Lloyd. This coffee shop had many businessmen coming through and eventually was named Lloyd of London Insurance. In the 1600s, coffee houses were spreading more rapidly to places such as Germany, Italy, and Paris. Germany is believed to be the first country to serve coffee with cake in order to balance out the bitter and sweet contrasting flavors. In France, people began mixing coffee with milk and sugar. Throughout the 1700s, Paris's coffee houses hosted people like Diderot, a French philosopher and art critic, and Voltaire, a writer and philosopher. It is believed that these men drank 50 cups of coffee a day, although at the time the coffee was in small portions and weak. Meanwhile, European empires began making money off of coffee growing, as well as using slaves and exploited workforces in places such as Asia, Latin America, and the Caribbean. When cultivation fueled by slaves was thriving in Latin America, growers displaced indigenous populations of plants and burned forests in order to expand their plantations. In 1906, Brazil was exporting over 80% of the world's coffee. The same year, Milan's World Fair showcased the first commercial espresso machine. Then people began to develop things such as industrial roasting machines and various coffee brands. In the mid-1950s, coffee became such a regular part of people's days that U.S. factories began incorporating coffee breaks. When coffee cake was first in American cookbooks, they were in the bread or cake sections, but then eventually got their own section because of the popularity as well as how many different varieties of coffee cake there were. When African countries cut colonial ties, many increased their coffee production. Coffee later made its way to East Asia. It was especially popular as canned, pre-prepared beverages. What's more recently popularized is the focus on quality beans and special brewing methods. This idea launched farms in Central America and East Africa. Unfortunately, coffee workers were still experiencing inhumane conditions and very little money. The good news is that this motivated certification efforts for coffee production that met ethical standards, which include minimum wage, sustainable farming, and ethical practices. I don't know about you, but I'm very grateful to Europe and Ethiopia for blessing us with this incredible duo of coffee and coffee cake. And we have reached the end of today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed learning about how to make coffee cake, as well as hearing about the history of coffee cake and coffee. See you next time.